The conference room buzzed with conversation, the air thick with the usual blend of business chatter and caffeine-fueled ambition. I barely heard it. My phone lit up. Jason. I sighed, stepping into the hallway. I expected the usual small talk, his half-hearted attempts at checking in. How's the trip? When are you coming home? Instead, his voice came through cold. Smug. I'm divorcing you. Just like that. No preamble.
No hesitaschen.
Just a declaration, as if he was delivering a business memo. I've already sold the apartment, so you'll need to figure out where you're going to live. A pause. Enjoy that. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The audacity. The calculated cruelty. It was almost laughable. My grip tightened around my phone, my nails pressing into my palm. You sold the apartment? I kept my voice even. Controlled. Jason let out a dry, condescending laugh. Yeah. Vanessa and I need the money to start our life together. She deserves better than a tiny place like that anyway. Vanessa. I had suspected for months. The late nights. The sudden work trips. The distance that had stretched between us like a chasm. But to hear her name, spoken so casually, as if I were the intruder in their life, lit a fire in my chest. He expected me to break. To beg. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Sounds good, I said smoothly. Not a tremor in my voice. Jason hesitated. Maybe he'd expected tears. Pleading. Not this. The moment it clicked, my name is Natalie, and up until that phone call, I thought I had married a man I could trust. Jason and I had been together 6 years. We had built a life together. Or so I thought. The apartment, our home, was supposed to be a symbol of that. A cozy 2-bedroom in the city. The moment I walked through the door, I'd fallen in love with it. I thought he had too. But looking back, the signs had been there. The small cracks in the foundation that I had ignored. Jason's casual dismissal of finances. The way he'd brush off my concerns with a charming smile and a quick kiss. I had assumed his confidence came from knowing what he was doing. Now I realized it came from knowing he could manipulate me. But there was one crucial thing Jason didn't know. The mistake that would cost him everything he thought he had won. He thought he could pull the rug out from under me. Sell our home. Walk away scot-free. But Jason had overlooked one small, devastating detail. The deed to the apartment? It had been in my name alone for months. We had refinanced earlier in the year. I had the paperwork changed. Jason had agreed without reading the fine print. He had signed away his rights without a second thought. His arrogance was going to be his downfall. Checkmate. By the time I returned to my hotel that evening, shock had turned to resolve. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. Jason wanted a fight? Fine. But this was a fight I was going to win. I called Rachel, my lawyer and longtime friend. He sold the apartment? She repeated, incredulous. Does he even realize he can't do that without your consent? Apparently not, I said, a slow, cold satisfaction creeping into my voice. He thinks he's already spent the money on his new life with Vanessa. Rachel let out a low, dry laugh. Well, he's in for a rude awakening. The sale is invalid. You can prove sole ownership. And if he's taken any money from the buyer. A pause. He's on the hook for fraud. The word fraud sent a thrill of satisfaction through me. What do we need to do? First, we notify the buyer that the sale isn't legal. Then we draft a formal letter outlining the consequences of Jason's actions. If he's dumb enough to try anything else, we take him to court. As I hung up, a strange sense of calm settled over me. Jason thought he had outsmarted me, that he had left me powerless, scrambling. But in reality, he had just set himself up for the ultimate humiliation. The long game. The rest of my trip, I threw myself into work. I compartmentalized the betrayal, buried the hurt, focused on the task ahead. The pain was still there, but so was something else. Purpose. The knowledge that I was about to rip the rug out from under Jason the same way he had tried to do to me. When I boarded the plane home, I was ready. Ready to face Jason. Ready to dismantle his lies. And most of all, ready to start over without him. The final blow. The flight home gave me hours to think about how everything had unraveled. Jason's arrogance was astounding. The way he had assumed he could control the narrative. That he could walk away unscathed. But he underestimated me. By the time I landed, Everything was already in motion. The buyer had been notified. The sale had been blocked. And Jason? He had no idea what was coming. I walked into my apartment one final time, feeling nothing but satisfaction. Jason had been so focused on his exit strategy, he had never once considered mine. Now it was his turn to figure out where he was going to live. And me? I had one. But, more importantly, I was free. Jason hadn't even bothered to hide his betrayal. As if I were nothing more than an obstacle, something to be bulldozed on his way to freedom. But instead of spiraling into rage or heartbreak, I focused on one thing. What I was going to do next. Jason thought he'd won. Thought I was powerless. What he didn't realize was that I'd been playing the long game, without even knowing it. Game on. The plane touched down and I didn't waste a second. I hauled my suitcase off the carousel and called Rachel. I'm back. She didn't bother with pleasantries. We've already notified the buyer, she said briskly. They were shocked to say the least. And furious with Jason. Good, I murmured. They're cooperating, which makes our job easier. As for Jason, what did he say? I sent the formal letter to his email this morning. I could hear the smirk in Rachel's voice. It outlines the illegality of the sale, your sole ownership of the apartment, and the potential fraud charges. A pause. He hasn't responded yet, but if I had to guess, he's going to be livid. I smiled. Let him stew. The confrontation. The apartment was eerily quiet when I stepped inside. Jason's things were still here. His jacket draped over the chair. His shoes kicked carelessly by the door. But something had shifted. It no longer felt like his space. It was mine. And soon enough he'd know it too. Jason stormed in that evening, rage etched into every line of his face. His phone clutched tight in his hand. What the hell is this? He barked, waving the letter Rachel had sent. You're telling me I can't sell the apartment? It's half mine. I crossed my arms. No, Jason. It's not. He froze. Confusion flickered across his face, warring with anger. What are you talking about? I didn't flinch. I reached for the deed, the one I had pulled earlier from my files. Held it up. After we refinanced, I had the deed transferred to my name. I tapped the paper with my nail. You signed off on it, remember? Or did you just skim the paperwork, like you always do? Jason's mouth opened, closed. For a split second I saw panic. Then the sneer. You think you're so smart, don't you? He spat. This doesn't change anything. I already made a deal. You're going to look like a fool when it all falls apart. I didn't blink. The sale is already void, Jason. His jaw tightened. The buyer knows it. And they're ready to take legal action if you don't return the money. I took a step closer. Oh, and speaking of money. Lowered my voice. If you've spent a single cent of that deposit? I tilted my head. You're in even bigger trouble. Jason's confidence wavered. He shifted his weight. You don't know what you're talking about, he muttered, avoiding my gaze. I let out a slow, knowing exhale. Oh, Jason. I shook my head. I know exactly what I'm talking about. You've spent years treating me like I'm too naive to notice what you're doing. But guess what? I held his gaze unshaken. I've been paying attention. And now? You're going to deal with the consequences. Jason started pacing. His frustration mounting. This is ridiculous. You're blowing everything out of proportion. I just watched. You can't just kick me out. A slow smile. Actually, I can. His eyes flicked toward the door. You can stay here for now, I continued. But only because I'm giving you the courtesy of time to figure out your next move. But let me be clear, Jason. I'm not going anywhere. The downfall over the next few days, Jason's anger turned into desperation. The calls started. The frantic voicemails, a mix of pleading and thinly veiled threats. Meanwhile, Rachel worked behind the scenes. The buyer rescinded the agreement. Furious. The divorce paperwork was drafted. You're in a good position, Natalie, Rachel told me. Jason has no leverage. Between the voided sale and the fraud charges hanging over his head, he'll have to cooperate if he wants to avoid a bigger mess. It was a relief. But it also made me realize just how much control Jason had held over my life. For years, I had ignored his arrogance, told myself it wasn't worth the fight. Now, I was taking it all back. The ultimate humiliation. One evening, Laura, my best friend, came over. We boxed up Jason's things, stacking them in the corner of the living room. She held up one of his gaudy ties. "How's he taking all this?" she asked with a smirk. I laughed. "Not well." I tossed a shirt into the donation pile. "He still thinks he can talk his way out of it." Laura snorted. "Typical. But you're not budging, right?" "Not an inch." She grinned. "Good. He doesn't deserve a single inch of your space or your time." I nodded. For so long I had felt alone in my marriage, carrying the emotional weight, the financial burden, while Jason took credit for everything. But now, I wasn't alone, and that made all the difference. The final blow, the last piece of my plan, fell into place the day Jason brought Vanessa to the apartment. I was at the dining table, reviewing paperwork when the door swung open. Jason strolled in. Smug. Vanessa looped her arm through his, surveying the apartment like she owned the place. "So this is where we're staying?" Her voice was thick with entitlement. I stood, heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. I met her gaze. "No." Her smile faltered. Jason's head snapped toward me. "What is this?" he demanded. I exhaled slowly. This is where Jason was staying. I glanced at him. "You, Vanessa? You won't be staying here at all." Her face twisted in confusion. "What are you talking about?" she scoffed. Jason's jaw clenched. "Natalie, don't." I held up the deed. "This apartment? It's mine." A beat of silence. Then Vanessa turned to Jason. "Wait, what?" I let the moment hang. Let the weight of his failure sink in. Then I smiled. "Looks like you'll have to find somewhere else to stay." And with that I turned away. As this was my home. And Jason was just another thing I was leaving behind. I gestured around the apartment, my voice steady but firm. This is my home, Jason. Not yours. Not hers. And certainly not some hotel for you to shack up in after stabbing me in the back. Vanessa's expression turned icy, but she said nothing. Jason, on the other hand, looked like he was about to explode. "You can't do this," he shouted, his face turning red. "You're being unreasonable." I didn't even flinch. "No, Jason. What's unreasonable is thinking you could sell my home, pocket the money, and expect me to just roll over. You're lucky I haven't filed criminal charges for now." Jason stood there, breathing hard, his phone clutched in his fist. Vanessa crossed her arms, shifting uncomfortably. "You're being ridiculous, Natalie." Jason tried again, his voice laced with desperation now. "You can't just kick me out of my own home." I took a slow step forward, making sure every word landed. "This is my home, Jason. The deed has been in my name for months and you know it. You signed the paperwork without even reading it, just like you always do." Jason's bluster faltered. Vanessa's manicured fingers tightened around the strap of her purse. Her eyes narrowed. "Wait, what is she talking about?" she asked, her voice sharp. "You told me this was your apartment. You said you sold it." Jason flinched, a fraction too slow to hide it. "It's complicated," he mumbled. "I'll handle it." I let out a slow, deliberate laugh. "Oh, it's not complicated at all." I stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough. "Jason tried to sell an apartment that doesn't belong to him. That sale? Void. And as of right now, he doesn't have a leg to stand on." Vanessa's expression cracked. Her confidence wilted in real time. "You mean the money you told me you had?" Her voice rose. She turned to him, eyes widening. "Oh my God, did you lie about that too?" Jason held up his hands. "Vanessa, let me explain." She took a step back. "No," I cut in smoothly, watching Jason squirm. "Let me explain." I turned to Vanessa, holding her gaze. "Jason tried to sell the apartment behind my back, thinking he could pocket the money and leave me with nothing. What he didn't know is that I had the deed transferred to my name months ago." I gave Jason a pointed look. "So not only did he fail to sell it, but he also committed fraud by pretending he could." Vanessa's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. Then she whispered the word as if saying it out loud made it real. "Fraud." Jason palmed his face. "Vanessa, it's not like that." "Oh, it's exactly like that," I said, crossing my arms. "And if he doesn't get his things and leave by the end of the day?" I'll make sure he faces the legal consequences. Vanessa's face drained of color. She turned on Jason, her voice icy and clipped. Are you serious? Jason grabbed her arm. I can fix this. I just need. She ripped herself away. Don't. She snapped, her face twisting in disgust. Just don't. I am not getting dragged into your mess. Without another word, she spun on her heel and stormed out. Jason watched helplessly as the door clicked shut behind her. I couldn't help the small satisfied smile that crept across my lips. I turned back to Jason. Looks like you're on your own. Checkmate. Jason slumped onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. Natalie, please. His voice was hoarse. I screwed up. I know that. But you don't have to do this. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed a folder, and set it down on the coffee table in front of him. You're right, I said calmly. I don't have to do this. But I'm going to. Jason stared at the folder like it might bite him. What is this? He asked, but he already knew. Divorce paperwork. His face went pale. My lawyer has already drafted everything. I continued, my voice steady, unwavering. And I suggest you sign it quickly. The sooner you do, the sooner we can both move on. Jason's throat bobbed as he swallowed. You really hate me that much? I let out a small bitter laugh. No, Jason. I don't hate you. I tilted my head, studying him. The man I had once loved, the man who had once promised me forever. I pity you. I saw his shoulders tense. You had everything. Someone who loved you. A home we built together. And you threw it away because you couldn't see past your own ego. I took a deep breath, my heart steady. I want you out of here by the end of the day. Pack your things. Figure out where you're going to stay. But make no mistake. This is the last time I'm giving you any grace. Jason opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, but then his shoulders slumped. He reached for the folder, his fingers trembling slightly. Fine, he muttered. I'll go. I nodded. Good. I walked to the door, placing my hand on the handle before turning back one last time. And Jason. He looked up. Don't even think about trying anything else. I let my voice drop just enough. Rachel is already handling everything. And if you cross another line, I won't hesitate to let the courts handle it. I pulled open the door. Jason slowly stood, grabbing his coat. He hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then he walked out, his footsteps heavy with defeat. As the door clicked shut, a weight I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying lifted. I was free. Finally. For a fleeting moment I felt something close to sadness, not for Jason, but for the life I once thought we were building. For the version of him I had believed in. For what could have been if he had been the man I thought he was. But the moment passed quickly, burned away by relief. I closed the door behind him, turning the new key I'd had made. This is my home now. And no one, especially not Jason, would ever take that away from me again. Reclaiming my space, reclaiming myself. The silence after Jason left was deafening. For the first time in years, the apartment didn't feel heavy. No lingering traces of his entitlement, his manipulation, his lies. It was just me. Me and the home I had fought to keep. Me and the quiet realization that I had won. Not just against him, but against every doubt I'd ever had about standing up for myself. I took a slow walk through the space. His gaming chair was gone. The framed jerseys that had cluttered the walls? Gone. That gaudy coffee table he had insisted on keeping? Gone. The apartment felt lighter. Brighter. Like it was mine again. That evening, Emily showed up with takeout and a bottle of wine. She plopped onto the couch with a dramatic sigh. Tell me it's true. Tell me he's really gone. I grabbed 2 wine glasses, smiling. Gone and not coming back. Emily grinned, raising her glass. To fresh starts and well-deserved victories. I clinked mine against hers, letting the moment settle. To never letting someone walk all over me again. As the night went on, the weight of the past slowly lifted. I wasn't just surviving. I was reclaiming. Piece by piece, I took it back. Over the next few days. I transformed the apartment. It wasn't just about redecorating. It was about making this space a reflection of me. I rearranged the furniture. Hung my favorite artwork in the living room. Added small touches of joy, plants, candles, books. Every change was an act of taking back what had always been mine. One afternoon, Rachel called with updates. Her voice was filled with the kind of calm confidence that made me feel untouchable. The fraud charges are off the table since the buyer decided not to pursue them, she said. But the divorce? That's moving along smoothly. Once Jason signs, you'll be officially free. That word, free. It wasn't just about the divorce. It was about everything I'd been carrying for years. The resentment, the self-doubt, the feeling of being trapped in a marriage where I wasn't valued. And now, it was finally being lifted. His words no longer mattered. Jason tried to reach out. First it was apologies. Half-hearted attempts to rewrite history. I made a mistake. Can't we at least talk? Then came the desperation. You're going to ruin me, Natalie. Is that what you want? I didn't reply. For once, I wasn't wasting my energy trying to fix something broken beyond repair. He made his choices. And now, he was living with the consequences. A home that finally felt like mine by the end of the week. The apartment felt completely new. Not because of drastic renovations but because of how it felt. Warm. Inviting.
Entire la imine.
One night I sat on the couch, a cup of tea in hand, looking out at the city lights. I let myself think about everything that had happened. Jason's betrayal had been a shock, but it had also been a wake-up call. For too long I had convinced myself I didn't deserve better. That I had to settle for whatever scraps of respect and love he decided to throw my way. But now, I knew better. I wasn't just reclaiming my apartment. I was reclaiming my life. 1 month later my life looked completely different. Not just because of the apartment but because of me. Rachel had handled the divorce with ruthless efficiency. Jason signed the papers without a fight. Maybe he finally realized he had no leverage. There was no dramatic final argument. No plea to work things out. Just a cold, clean break. And that was the most satisfying part of all. Letting go on my terms. One day while sorting through old papers I found a photo. Jason and me from years ago. We were smiling. Arms wrapped around each other. Full of hope and promise. I stared at it for a moment, letting the memories wash over me. There had been good times. There had been moments where I truly believed we were building something real. But those moments, they were gone. Overshadowed by neglect, manipulation, and betrayal. I tucked the photo into an envelope and put it away. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because I wasn't ready to throw it away just yet. It was part of my past. But it didn't define me anymore. A toast to the future. Emily and I celebrated the finalized divorce with dinner and drinks at a trendy rooftop bar. She grinned at me, tilting her cocktail. You're glowing, she said. Single life suits you. I laughed, a real unburdened laugh. It's not the single life, I said. It's the freedom. I lifted my glass. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm living under someone else's rules. We toasted to that. And as the night went on, I felt something settle inside me. Pride. Not just because I had survived, but because I had thrived. Looking forward back at home, I started planning for the future. This apartment had been a refuge. A symbol of everything I had reclaimed. But I knew I wouldn't stay here forever. Someday I'd move into a new home. A place untouched by Jason. A place where his shadow never lingered. Until then, I was going to make the most of every moment. The final thought as I curled up on the couch that night, a quiet peace washed over me. I thought about that phone call. The way Jason had laughed, so sure he had one. I smiled. Because his arrogance had been his downfall. And my quiet strength had been my salvation. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where I called the shots. Where I chose happiness on my own terms. And for the first time in a long, long time, I was truly free.